Welcome back, folks. You know, Democrats keep proving they're less of a political party and more of a traveling improv troupe that thinks rules are just suggestions. Today we have California Governor Greasy Gavin Newsom trying to gerrymander our state with all the subtlety of a used car salesman, Adam Schiff, re-emerging like political mildew with a punchline so flat it could double as a Biden economy chart, and Karen Bass calling the enforcement of federal law lawlessness. It's a perfect clown parade of Democrat projection, hypocrisy, and cell phone after cell phone. So buckle up, because the clips you're about to see prove the Democrats' favorite sport isn't governing, it's gaslighting.
We're all here today in solidarity to say that we will continue to resist. We are not going to accept this behavior from this administration, and that Los Angeles stands united.
It's truly great to see criminals are standing together to fight for their right to continue being lawless. Only in America do they have the option to do something like that because of our constitutionally protected freedoms. If this press conference were happening anywhere else in the world, say Saudi Arabia, Iran, South Africa, or even maybe England, they'd be at best arrested and at worst executed for openly violating and challenging federal law. But not in America, folks. So thank God for our God-given freedoms, because no matter how much you disagree with these commie Democrat fools, they still have the right to live as fools for as long as they like. Let's just hope they learn a thing or two along the way. And that's where the bigger picture comes in, folks, because this isn't just about unity or standing with immigrant communities, as Karen Bass frames it. It's about city government normalizing the idea that federal immigration law is optional if it conflicts with this Democrat ideology. And that's a dangerous precedent, because once law enforcement becomes a choose-your-own-adventure type game, you don't get to stop the chaos where you want. It just spreads like a virus. This is the cultural moment we're in, folks. The Democrat Party has built a political identity around resisting any policy they deem immoral, not through reform or legislation, but through flat-out noncompliance, backed by activist media, universities, and social pressure. The result is a two-tiered system, one where law applies selectively and loyalty to the narrative matters more than loyalty to the rule of law. And that's not unity, folks. It's organized defiance dressed up as virtue. Anyway, yesterday during Gavin's sham press conference, BPD was outside the venue arresting illegals who were just, hanging around the area, because in Los Angeles we have over 1 million illegal aliens, so you kind of just walk out on the street and you bump into a bunch of them. Anyway, Mayor Karen reacted to these detainments in the only way a Karen could react.
There is no way this was a coincidence.
Whoa.
This was widely publicized that the governor and many of our other elected officials were having a press conference here to talk about redistricting, and they decided they were going to come and thumb their nose in front of the governor's face. Why would you do that? That is unbelievably disrespectful.
Is it?
It's a provocative act.
It's the law.
About disorder in Los Angeles, and they are the source of the disorder in Los Angeles right now. This is just completely unacceptable. This is a administration. This is a Customs and Border Patrol that has gone amok. This absolutely has to stop. There was no danger here. There was no need to detain anyone here. And there was certainly no need to have a provocative act right here where the governor is having a press conference.
Can we get a mental health check on Karen? Because that's not normal, folks. She's like 70-something, which in commie years is like 120, and all that gluttonous Marxism has a way of busting your coronaries. But beyond the cheap laugh, what she's saying here is actually more revealing than ridiculous. She's framing a lawful ICE raid, something well within federal authority, as a provocative act simply because it happened near a press conference. That's a textbook example of bad faith framing, turning lawful enforcement into political persecution, not by disputing the law itself, but by questioning the motives of those enforcing it. This is how the Democrat Party operates, folks. They don't challenge immigration policy in Congress where it belongs. They delegitimize enforcement on the ground to erode it by attrition. It's a cultural strategy as much as a political one, backed by the activist media and city government officials that treat federal law like an optional subscription plan. The more this mindset spreads, the more it conditions the public to see law as relative and loyalty to ideology as a highest virtue. And that's not protecting communities, by the way. It's dismantling the rule of law one press conference at a time. And folks, this isn't just by accident. This is calculated. Mayor Karen Bass, as I love to remind all of you every single time we talk about her on this show, she's a trained communist insurgent trained in Cuba by Fidel. She's doing her job here. She's infiltrated American government and she's dissolving it from within, following the Leninist playbook so they can ultimately undermine American values, a constitutional republic, and ultimately bring upon a communist utopia that people of the likes of Karen and Zohran Mamdani and AOC and the entire Democrat establishment at this point have just embraced. And since we're on the topic of Greasy Gavin's press conference, let's take a step from the outside into the press hall where Gavin made this announcement and also made the very unusual decision to choose one of the most corrupt politicians in American history to open for him. I'm talking about Adam Schiff, who's currently under investigation for all levels of fraud and corruption. So let's see what Shifty Schiff had to say.
He doesn't give a rat's ass about you.
Oh, and you do.
Not in California, not in Texas. He only cares about himself. It is his underlying corruption that is responsible for the reason why you are struggling hard to make a living.
Are you kidding me?
And we are going to fight back. We're going to make sure that here in California, your vote matters.
How?
If they're going to play with fire, we're going to fight fire with fire.
As a state burns, huh?
And let me just say this to quote our wonderful governor, Donald Trump, thank you for your attention to this matter.
This whole speech is just pure projection, folks. There's no one who cares less about you than Adam Schiff, a career politician who burned through millions of your hard-earned taxpayer dollars chasing political vendettas against President Trump, pushing easily debunked hoaxes like the Russia collusion narrative, and leading baseless impeachment crusades. Schiff isn't driven by principle. He's driven by self-preservation and the thrill of political theater. And that's exactly what this was, a staged moment designed to cast California Democrats as the latest power grab, as some noble defense of democracy, when in reality it's the state government openly rewriting the rules to protect its own dominance. This is how Democrats keep power in places like California. They frame aggressive partisan maneuvers as righteous resistance while counting on a compliant media and an ideologically primed voter base to never question their tactics. Schiff's smug one-liner to Trump isn't just cringeworthy. It's a distilled essence of a political class that has convinced itself that manipulating the system is an act of virtue as long as they're the ones doing it. But Schiff wasn't the only clown that Gavin rolled out yesterday. He also invited Jose Padilla, our state senator, to give some words about how much of a victim he is.
Donald Trump calls officials in Texas and says, give me 5 more Republican seats. Then it sounds the same as when he called the Secretary of State in Georgia after losing in 2020 and saying, find me 11,000 more votes. It's corruption. He's trying to rig the system. One of the earlier speakers said extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures because we're not living in normal times. In normal times, a political party in power would be proud of their accomplishments and they'd be running on their record asking for voters to keep them in power. That's not what's happening right now. But Donald Trump and complicit Republicans in Congress gutting health care, threatening social security, undermining the Constitution.
Why is the American flag on the ground, dude? This was all just pure projection, deflection, and lies, par for the course for Democrats, folks. But what I'm most concerned about is why on earth is the American flag on the ground behind these politicians? Couldn't they put it up on a pole? Who made the decision to place the American flag on the floor or seemingly so close to it that you can't really tell the difference? Folks, these are 2 U.S. senators and a presidential hopeful all challenging federal law and the leader of the federal government with subliminal messaging that suggests they're literally standing on the flag. You can't make this up. The disrespect for America from Democrats isn't just palpable anymore. It's visually represented in their political actions. These people despise our country and our flag, which is why they put it beneath them. Because they see themselves as demigods above our constitutional republic and the American people. And they believe in the idea that we serve them, not the other way around. None of this is by accident, by the way. That imagery, whether intentional or not, tells you exactly where the Democrat priorities lie, above the needs of Americans. You see, in the modern Democrat mindset, America is something to stand over, not stand for. And while they accuse Republicans of rigging the system, they're pushing their own mid-decade redistricting schemes in California, the very definition of manipulating rules for partisan gain. This is how we got here, folks. A political culture where respect for the country's core principles is treated as optional. Democrats have spent years eroding those shared civic norms through academia, media, and activist politics, conditioning voters to believe that the Constitution is a suggestion and patriotism is suspect. It makes you a fascist. The American flag being on the ground in this manner is more than just a visual metaphor. It's how Democrats truly see America. Something to stand on, not something to uphold. Anyway, on to our main event. Greasy Gavin later gave a speech surrounded by his favorite Democrat commie comrades, who all came out in very small numbers. Notably, there were about 45 people at the venue, as we'll see in a few moments. But anyway, let's get on to Newsom's words.
He's a failed president. Who else sends ICE same time having a conversation like this? Someone who's weak. Someone is broken.
And you know
someone
weakness.
whose weakness is masquerading as strength.
Hey, how about you use a different talking point, hey?
The most unpopular president in modern history.
And you're popular?
An economy that's collapsing all around him.
And our state isn't?
You saw the new wholesale prices going up almost a full percentage point today. Inflation is going up.
Gas prices.
Job creation is going down.
People are leaving in droves the state.
He's trying to rewrite history.
And you're not?
Smithsonian, censoring historical facts. And in the spirit of what Adam Schiff said, he's trying to put America in reverse. Voting
trying to
rights,
bring us to the USSR.
Civil rights, LGBTQ rights, on women's rights. He wants to bring us back to a pre-1960s world. That's what this is all about. It's about power, and I want to end on this. And we are about to give power back to the people.
Translation, Greasy Gavin is about to grab the power by the pussy like it's his best friend's wife, folks. That's what's really happening here. And don't fall for the gaslight, by the way. Restoring American principles isn't taking America back in time to the 1960s. It's returning the nation to the values and systems that made it the most successful and freest country in the history of the world. By contrast, Democrats are pushing us toward a Soviet-style model where authoritarian single-party control crushed dissent, decimated economies, and led to the execution or exile of some 50 million people. That's not hyperbole. That's literal historical record. In California, we've already seen the preview. Skyrocketing home costs, collapsing public services, mass exodus of residents, and an economy strangled by overregulation and political favoritism. Gavin's attempt to paint Trump as weak for enforcing federal law is also textbook projection. Attack your opponent for the very traits and failures you embody. This is the Democrat playbook, folks. Redefine strength as tyranny, label accountability as oppression, and package their own power grabs as giving power back to the people, when in reality, they're consolidating it in the hands of an unaccountable ruling class whose sole interest in the electorate is using it to enrich themselves at your expense.
You have the power on November 4th to stand up for people that are being bullied. You have the power to stand up for people that are being intimidated. You have the power to stand up to the rule of law. We're giving the people of this state the power to save democracy, not just in California, but all across the United States of America. I hope we are waking up to this reality. Wake up, America. Wake up to what Donald Trump is doing. Wake up to his assaults. Wake up to the assault on institutions and knowledge and history. Wake up to his war on science and public health.
What?
His war against the American people. This is a guy who lays claim to want to get a Nobel Prize, sitting there and bending his knee to Mr. Putin. You have the power.
CCP shill and Xi Jinping bootlicker Gavin speaks from experience, it seems. You could even tell he took a pause as he made his comments about Trump and Putin, likely remembering all the times he sold California out to the Chinese Communist Party just to maintain a modicum of stability in a state bleeding residents and businesses every day, week, and year by the hundreds of thousands. And a state that's, by the way, solely propped up by the business the ports bring in with all the cheap imports from China. And now in the middle of that decline, here is Gavin lecturing us about saving democracy while pushing a ballot measure designed to entrench single-party rule in California even further, framing it as a moral crusade against bullying and intimidation. And that's the true face of the Democrat Party, folks. Redefine partisan consolidation as a defense of freedom, convince voters that opposing your policies is an assault on institutions, and wrap it all in apocalyptic language about waking up to your enemies. It's a strategy straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Claim sole ownership of democracy while undermining the very checks and balances that protect it.
We can't stand back and watch this democracy disappear district by district all across this country, not just in Texas, but in Missouri, where J.D. Vance went just a week ago, in Indiana, in places like Ohio, in places like Florida. We need to stand up, not just California. Other blue states need to stand up. We need to be firm in our resolve.
First off, we are not a democracy in the pure sense Gavin pretends we are. We are a constitutional republic. And if you're going to rail against the system while trying to manipulate it from within, at least have the decency to respect the structure you're undermining. When Gavin warns that democracy is disappearing district by district, he's not talking about voter suppression or disenfranchisement, which is what Democrats actually do every election. He's talking about losing partisan advantage in states where the Democrat grip isn't total. This is the sleight of hand we see constantly from Democrats. Redefine democracy to mean democratic control so that any electoral shift away from their power is cast as an existential threat to the country. It's a calculated rhetorical weapon rooted in decades of conditioning through media and political activism to equate progressive dominance with just civic health, which it's actually very much the opposite. In reality, what Gavin is pushing is a normalization of mid-decade redistricting in California to counter similar moves in red states, a race to the bottom that entrenches single-party rule and erodes the principle of competitive representation. This is how the left maintains influence. Frame power grabs as moral imperatives, wrap them in the language of civic virtue, and count on their institutional allies to repeat the message until opposition sounds like heresy.
To recognize today is Liberation Day in the state of California. And as Senator Schiff said, Donald Trump, you have poked the bear, and we will punch back.
Gavin loves to talk about weakness masquerading as strength, and I'm becoming increasingly certain he's actually just talking about himself because, wow, this man puts the eek in weak. Calling this Liberation Day is pure political theater, the kind of self-congratulatory branding you use when you want to frame a partisan move as some grand moral victory. But what's really being liberated here, folks, isn't the people of California. It's the Democrat Party's grip on the state. Now fortified through the very kind of institutional manipulation they claim to oppose, this is a textbook case of the Democrat narrative engineering happening in real time. Inflate your opposition into a boogeyman, then cast your own consolidation of power as resistance to tyranny. Over time, this conditioning, amplified by their media apparatus, teaches voters to associate partisan dominance with freedom itself. And when that association becomes entrenched, every check or challenge to Democrat power can be painted as an attack on liberation, no matter how undemocratic the Democrat response move actually is. Anyway, Gavin isn't one to shy away from putting his face in front of every single camera under the sun whenever he gets the opportunity to do it. So obviously, after finishing his press conference, his little tiny press conference, he just went on a very unnecessary media tour to tell Californians how this redistricting attempt is actually really about Californians and not just some petty retaliatory response from Democrats who very desperately try to hold on to power.
I hope it's a wake-up call to the President of the United States. I'm sort of following his example. If you've got issues with what I'm putting out, you sure as hell should have concerns about what he's putting out as president. So to the extent it's gotten some attention, I'm pleased.
Of course you are.
But I think the deeper question is, how have we allowed the normalization of his tweets through social posts over the course of the last many years to go without similar scrutiny and notice?
Gavin has the audacity to claim that Trump isn't facing scrutiny for his posts. Folks, need I remind you that President Trump had to create his own social media platform after being permanently banned from every major platform while still serving as president. The only person in U.S. history to be deplatformed while in the office of the president. That was an unprecedented act of political censorship, a direct attack on the American people's right to have unfettered access to the words and statements of their elected leader. While private companies aren't bound by the First Amendment in the same way the government is, the move blurred the line between private action and public censorship, especially amid evidence that government officials have pressured or coordinated with big tech on content moderation. For Newsom to posture as though Trump's communications go unchecked is either willful ignorance or deliberate gaslighting. And this is where the broader cultural danger is. When political actors rewrite recent history in real time, they're not just defending themselves, they're conditioning the public to accept selective enforcement of speech rights. The Democrat Party has spent years building a system through big tech, media allies, and academia where speech is free only if it reinforces the Democrat worldview, and where accountability is applied unevenly to keep one side in permanent defense. Gavin's trolling isn't about following Trump's example. It's about normalizing the Democrat manipulation of the public square. Now, folks, it goes without saying that the rollout of Gavin Newsom's so-called Election Rigging Response Act in Los Angeles was meant to be a Democrat show of force, but on-location footage tells a very different story. Multiple videos circulating on social media show that the crowd numbered only a few dozen people, maybe less, with much of the audience consisting of Democrat elected officials, party operatives, labor leaders, activists, members of the press. According to the post from those who attended and others sharing similar clips, many of the people on site were there in an official or paid capacity, not as grassroots supporters. In a state with nearly 40 million residents, Newsom struggled to draw more than a smattering of spectators for what he billed as one of the most consequential political fights of the year. Now, what made this press conference controversial is how it was executed. The announcement was streamed through state channels, promoted by official government accounts, and accompanied by a slickly produced campaign-style ad, despite the fact that the ballot measure itself does not legally exist yet. By law, California must pass enabling legislation to call the election, define the process, and authorize the funding. As of the rally date, no such bill had passed, and the proposed special election remains hypothetical. Yet taxpayers appear to have footed the bill for a staged event designed to generate campaign-style buzz for a partisan initiative that does not benefit Californians. That said, State Assemblymember Kate Sanchez quickly filed a formal complaint with the California Fair Political Practices Commission, alleging that Gavin had improperly used public resources for what was essentially a ballot campaign. In her words, this was a power trip on the public's dime, not leadership. And she's right. The fact that the governor's office could choreograph such an event, roll out a professionally cut ad, and blanket the message across official platforms before the legal framework was even in place speaks to how blurred the lines have become between state governance and party campaigning in California, all due to Democrat gerrymandering over the last few decades in the state. That said, folks, here's a political reality. Gavin is overplaying his hand. While he still enjoys deep institutional support within the state's Democrat machine, much of California's population is far less enamored with his leadership. His 2021 recall election proved that a significant share of the electorate, even in one of the bluest states, is willing to mobilize against him. Empty-looking rally in a city of millions suggests that enthusiasm for his latest power grab is tepid at best. Californians are dealing with high costs of living, surging crime in major cities, an exodus of residents and businesses, and a persistent homelessness crisis, none of which are addressed by this redistricting gambit. Culturally, this moment encapsulates how the modern Democrat establishment in California operates, treat electoral dominance as synonymous with democracy itself, frame opposition as dangerous to civic health, and use state apparatus to reinforce their party's control. Authoritarian cycle supported by friendly media coverage, institutional muscle from unions and advocacy groups, and an education system that has normalized one-party politics for an entire generation. The problem for Gavin is that even the most finely tuned messaging can't mask a lack of genuine public enthusiasm. In the end, no amount of staging can turn 47 people that we saw in this video into a movement that everybody in California can get behind. So the question isn't just whether Gavin crossed a legal or ethical line with all this, it's whether we've grown too comfortable letting those in power blur that line entirely. This move doesn't serve the interests of Californians struggling with real-world problems. It serves the interests of a governor nursing grudges and playing political payback. He's made it clear the driving force here isn't representation, it's not reform or the public good, it's retaliation, plain and simple. So think about it, folks. How many times have we been told something was for democracy, only to find out it was for the Democrats in charge? How often do we mistake manufactured optics for genuine public will? These aren't abstract questions. They shape the rules we live under, the choices we're allowed to make, and the truths we're expected to accept without question. If those truths are staged, if the crowds are curated, and if the institutions meant to protect fairness are turned into tools for settling political scores, then maybe the real wake-up call here isn't for the politicians, it's for us. So the question is, Well, we answer it. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.